Greetings and welcome to Intro to Social Work. This is the second lecture for this class. And in this lecture we're going to be looking at the social work and its context. Basically we're going to be looking at the theoretical and application use of social work in its various uses in the community, in the field, and we're going to look at what that means. At the beginning of chapter 2, there is a chapter case study on Sandra McLean, and there's a good way to look at that and see how this case applies to the social welfare policy and decisions that strongly affect the practice. So we'll be working on that in class as a classroom project. We'll be working on different case studies from the beginning of the book in our classroom studies, and then also you have a day in the lives of social workers that you're working on as well. What we want to look at is the different types of roles that take place within the realm of social work itself. This begins by looking at where these individuals, where a social worker will work through varying layers. And so if you look at this chart that's on the slide now, this is the social work system. You can say that there are varying layers to the type of work that a social worker does. The theoretical perspective is applied in client situation, and if you see that social work requires working with systems of many sizes. Systems theory assists the social worker in attending to and understanding biological and social systems affecting the ongoing practice. As you can see here that all levels of the system are interacting with each other. And as you see here, there are federal agencies, state agencies, there are social services, there are friends, family, and individual. And so the federal laws affect the state agencies, and federal grants or federal funding comes down on the state level. States can apply for federal grants, and then social services, counties, local agencies can apply for those state funds, and then the state funds can, the agencies will then be able to apply them to individuals through their friends and family. So it's all a microcosm. The bottom line here is for us to be able to help the friends, the family, and the individual, and it works that way. A system is a whole consisting of interacting parts that are so interrelated that change in any one of the part affects all of the others. If there's a change in federal law or federal, then it will go all the way down to the individual. This includes the access to health care, which is a hot topic in our society right now, which is a good example of how on a federal level something trickles down all the way to the point to where it will affect the individual. Under the Bush administration, this was known as the faith-based initiative, and that faith-based initiative was a way of streamlining community services, said way to streamline community services and make monies available for community agencies to prepare and run different types of programs. 5 systems of special importance to social work is the change agent system, which is the system that allows the social worker to be within their agencies of employment. The client system is people who have requested social work services or who have entered into formal or informal contract with the social worker. Target system, which is people who need change in order for social work clients to meet their goals. action system, all those who cooperatively work with the social worker to accomplish desired changes. And then professional system, the social work education programs, professional organizations, and the social work professional culture, including values and ethics. Social workers at varying agencies will work together to make sure that clients are not falling through the system or falling through the cracks, or that to ensure that their individual needs are being met. The important thing to note here in the way that this can be seen as sometimes as the systems theory being a failure is with child protective services. Many times child protective services are involved in cases or have closed cases, and then it will go on to be some type of suspected abuse or neglect that comes after the case is closed, and this is one limitation of systems theory, where it's seen that so much of being in the system will begin for there to be a failure in the system, or weak links in the system can be seen as causing failure or breakdown in the delivery of services. When we talk about the ecosystems perspective, a concept of environment from ecosystems perspective is basically similar to the systems theory, that the focus is on the person, and everything surrounds the person is meant to be insulating to them. If you look back at this chart, the individual's in the middle, and then everything surrounding the individual is meant to insulate them as far as protection and to provide services when in need. With the ecosystems perspective, it encourages social workers to maintain simultaneous focus on person and environment. This is a place where you would want to clarify the fit between the person wants and needs. You would identify the stress where needs exceed resources, adapt to improve the fit, and social workers employ this perspective in their work with each different system. So how does this work? Basically, an actual fit between the wants and needs and the resources available to meet them. If a client needs clothing, food services, you're going to start them out with the basic services that are available, and then work them up and try and help them to be self-sufficient in their ability to access services. So what the client may want is a home of their own, and what they may need is shared housing. This is the process where people use and try to improve the fit between themselves and their environments. And that's directly quoted from the book there. So the generalist perspective is strongly rooted in systems theory and ecosystems perspective that developed out of systems theory, provided the framework for development of a generalist approach to social work. And what this says is that whereas the system is seen as a way for social workers to be involved in varying levels of work, of social change, and that the ultimate goal, whether someone's working on the national level, that their goal is to affect positive change for the individual, whether or not they're working with that individual or not. The generalist framework allows that person to employ an ecosystems perspective, which again is what we just covered, where we are trying to change the person's environment in order to affect a change for the person, and this is done by the following levels of intervention. Intervening with the individual, if the individual has any type of stress that can be worked through, if they need life skills, if they need education training, family, group, organization, or community. This means that wherever there is a breakdown or a need, wherever there is some type of change that needs to be affected, whether it's teen pregnancy, whether it's substance abuse, whether it's malnutrition or poverty, the generalist perspective says that this person is going to work to intervene in each of those areas where needed. Now, this can also mean a global environmental and spiritual consideration should be taken into place. The global, it means it's affecting everyone on Earth today. today and future generations as well. A lot of times this can be seen by the change that needs to take place is something that, for example, HIV education and other disease control, it's global, it's affecting the earth today and future generations. Wider environmental issues affect absolutely everyone as well as global issues. And it's just what you think it would mean. Environmental would have to do with pollution, birth defects, other type of things that are they affect everyone, but also it's on a global level. Fetal alcohol syndrome, other type of issues. And then spiritual awakening that can help empower people as they struggle to save planet Earth. So if you look at this, this is something that you can see a way of the generalist perspective taking a basic approach and applying it to any need in society, any need in the world. And the way that this happens is by employing a planned change process, and this planned change process is going to be by taking a problem-solving process, and the painstaking methodology used in professional social work practice is engaging the client, identifying and defining important issues, gathering and assessing data, identifying a plan of action for change, contradicting or debating the need for change, implementing plans of action, evaluating outcomes, and then terminating the process, and then reevaluating and restarting the process as needed. This is where we employ a planned change of process, and we do so by employing evidence-based approaches. If we find something that's worked in another community, then we want to adopt that. Where we find that problem in our community, want to find something that's worked somewhere else, and then implement that in our individual community. The focus is on social justice, of course. Now, when we look at the global perspective, it considers the global influences, especially as it relates to poverty and economics, consider the environment, fight the short-sightedness of economic power brokers, and consider the influence of religious, spiritual beliefs and values. And I just covered that earlier as far as it being the three areas: global, environmental, and spiritual, and how they impact personal as well as political relationships. The strengths perspective is a little different, because the strengths perspective comes from a planned change process, identifying the foundation of strengths. In other words, instead of going into a community and rooting out the weaknesses of that community, you would go in and strengthen and build upon the strengths in the community. Very similar to a strengths-based approach to theoretical approach to counseling. You would identify the system strengths, identify individual and community assets and protective factors that are working, and then focus on health promotion and well-being, and identifying, of course, from a behavior modification standpoint, when you look at something that's already there, it's much easier to build upon a positive behavior than it is to take away a negative one. From the social justice perspective and populations at risk, this is where we would look at social justice as a major professional value with related ethical principle of challenging social injustice. The strengths perspective, resilience, empowerment are combined. Despite difficulties clients experiences, they have also developed skills and attributes that have helped them overcome their challenges. And this is where the strengths perspective that I just spoke about in this previous slide adds to resilience, leads naturally to the idea of empowering clients. The empowerment is both personal empowerment as well as involving one's own sense of competence, control, mastery, and the like. As well as political empowerment involves resource accessibility and the power to make choices. Inherent to all social work values is the respect, the worthy, and dignity of all, no matter what environment you're in, to be able to respect the place that those who you're working with have come from and their need to have someone like you to advocate for them, as we talked about in lecture number 1. Respect the right of self-determination, as far as if someone doesn't want the help that you have, the access that you are in the community giving them. Not all will take part in what we have to offer and what we have as social workers in the community to give, and challenge and fight against oppression, discrimination, and injustice. Those are a social work or social justice perspective of what clients, what counselors who are social workers, what social workers in the field do in the realm of as change agents in the society. The political perspective, social workers can work towards changing government policies at the federal level. Social workers can assist clients by voting for candidates whose policies help the poor and disadvantaged. Social workers can develop an active political careers themselves. Within the political spectrum, defining how we vote and identify political parties, how political parties align themselves along political spectrum of right, which is conservative, or left, which is liberal or progressive. Conservative practices tend to want to keep things just as they are and resist change. Liberal or progressive practices worldview is quite different from conservative. The conception of human nature is more optimistic and will be seen as a human nature more optimistic than conservation perspective. Political action takes time and perseverance. Political action empowers those who are oppressed and discriminated against. Political action ensures that public resources are used fairly and justly, and values are the foundation of public policy. Something that's happened recently that we can see in our society is the Occupy Wall Street movement was a political activism type thing, or it was a group of people going in to do some type of work, which we would call activism or protesting in order to elicit a change, more specifically a change with as it relates to Wall Street and our financial system. Again, here is the views that fall in a continuum in these categories. Like I said earlier, the left is people who are good, they believe that people are good and should be protected from a corrupt environment. The environment influences opportunities, and government should influence and balance inequality. The right is maintain the status quo, haves keep what they have, minimal government intrusion, assert a common set of moral standards and values to maintain the status quo. There's also, as we should say, is there are liberal or progressive perspectives, neoliberalism and neoconservatism, radical perspectives, and then also on the political spectrum and social welfare policy. The greatest challenge in the future is locating a process for people with different political perspectives to enter into constructive dialogue. Presidential reaction to 9/11/2001 was one of war, which is profitable to large American corporations. Issues of voting fraud, concerns regarding the 2004 presidential election emerged. Resources needed at home and abroad to assist people in disasters are committed to military engagements. So this is where we see the left is the Green Party, the Democrats, and the Socialists. And on the right we have Republicans or Libertarians. This will conclude your lecture for Chapter 2, and be sure and study your key terms from this lecture as we prepare for our first exam.